It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And we begin with 2 days after the passing of the former president at a London clinic. Ex-President Muhammadu Buhari was yesterday buried in a blaze of glory with full military honors at his favorite spot, where he normally held court at his Daura residence in Katsina State. President Bola Tinubu personally received the remains of his predecessor as part of the final rites of honor at the Umaru Musa Yar'Adua International Airport, Katsina. He led other dignitaries to the sleepy town to pay their last respects to the late former Nigerian leader. Arise correspondent Benga Ashiru chronicles the final journey of the late leader.
Like the force of time that eventually humbles all, former President Muhammadu Buhari has now taken his place in living memory as the seventh Nigerian head of state to depart the world. His body arrived in Nigeria 2 days after his death in London, following a brief illness. The news of his passing plunged the nation into mourning as President Bola Tinubu ordered flags flown at half-mast. A high-level delegation was also dispatched to London to condole the Buhari family and make arrangements for the return of the late leader's body. The federal government declared a week of national mourning, and Tuesday was observed as a public holiday in his honor, as tributes continue to pour in from across the globe. In an elaborate ceremony, a presidential delegation led by the president himself, alongside global dignitaries, converged on the Umaru Yar'Adua International Airport to receive Buhari's body under tight security. From there, a solemn procession began as the body was conveyed to Daura, about 90 kilometers from Katsina, his ancestral home. Amidst gun salutes, military honors, and a crowd eager for a final glimpse, Buhari's casket was received with pomp and ceremony, a mark of respect for a man considered a disciplined leader and statesman. The burial, held in accordance with Islamic customs, was attended by family, friends, political associates, and citizens who came to pay their last respects. Muhammadu Buhari is remembered for his austere lifestyle, anti-corruption crusade, and infrastructure-driven policies. His military rule, 1983 to 1985, and civilian presidency, 2015 to 2023, shaped decades of Nigeria's political and economic discourse. His legacies, both as a military dictator and a democratically elected leader, will remain a subject of debate, reflection, and historical inquiry for generations to come. Benga Ashiru, Arise News.
Now, President Bola Tinubu has directed all federal agencies to ensure full compliance with Nigeria's international obligations. This is in our next story, as President Tinubu also charged the concerned agencies and parastatals to strengthen intergovernmental cooperation in authenticating the identities of individuals seeking consular services abroad. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga disclosed the directive in a statement issued yesterday. Onanuga stressed that the federal government also reiterated its unwavering commitment to maintaining and strengthening the long-standing and cordial diplomatic relations with the governments of the United States of America and the United Arab Emirates. Lastly, we look at issues concerning the judiciary and the legislature, as the National Assembly has formally responded to a legal demand for the reinstatement of suspended Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. The federal legislature insisted that the July 4th judgment by the Federal High Court in Abuja did not contain a binding order mandating Akpoti-Uduaghan's recall. It said the court only issued an advisory urging the Senate to consider her resumption. The latest letter, dated July 14, 2025, and obtained by our correspondent on Tuesday, was signed by Charles Yuela, Director of Litigation and Counseling for Clerk to the National Assembly. The letter was addressed to Akpoti-Uduaghan's lead counsel, Michael Jonathan Numa San. According to the Legal Department of the National Assembly, the court's position does not constitute an enforceable directive, but rather a recommendation that places the decision squarely on the Senate's discretionary powers. Akpoti-Uduaghan, representing Kogi Central Senatorial District on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, has been at the center of a legal and legislative storm since her suspension from the Senate in May. Now, of course, when the CTC was released at FME, it clarified a lot of the issues circulating. There'd been so much information circulating. And of course, thank goodness for the CTC, which came a little bit late, but it clarified all issues.
Exactly that. And it did, as you said, it did take a while for it to be received. I think everybody was eagerly anticipating its release, which was supposed to come before Friday, and then it ended up coming in close towards the weekend. That being said, now that we have seen the CTC, it does, as you said, offer a lot of clarity on this issue. I don't think many people would be surprised to know that in response to the court's response, or what they've had to say, that an appeal has now been filed by the Senate President. I don't think that will shock many people. And what it does do is just lengthen this process, because for the supporters of the suspended Senator Akpoti Uduaghan, they might have been optimistic that with the coming of this court order that she had in some interpretations won, especially since she addressed her supporters and said that she'd be resumed. She obviously thereafter clarified that she would not be approaching the Red Chamber to resume ahead of proper protocols. And it appears that as though in that time, it's obviously given the Senate President the ability, or the National Assembly as an institution, the ability to reject this reinstatement request and then file an appeal. It's, again, as I said, it lengthens this entire process, continues to make it messy, and it just, again, reignites, I think, conversations on what the true motivation behind this is. Is there actual malicious intent, or do you think that though the court has acknowledged the ability of the National Assembly to be able to punish its own members, is this extensive? Can the National Assembly not take into account what the judge has said, what the CTC has confirmed? It is unfortunate that this continues to, I think, distract many people, including these lawmakers, against and away from doing the work that they're supposed to be doing, especially the people of Kogi Central, who deserve to have their representative doing the work of representing them, which is one of the key tenets of her leadership as a senator. So we'll continue to follow this story, and we hope that it will meet a speedy and amicable end for all parties involved. Going on to the stories that we were discussing in terms of Nigeria's position in the world, when we're looking at these visa restrictions that have been coming from all different corners, from Canada, from the United States and the United Arab Emirates, all of them seeming to be coming one after the other, does paint and definitely hit the Nigerian traveller. And when we're looking at the United States, for example, it is especially unfortunate because, first and foremost, it isn't actually on the basis of reciprocity. Nigeria does not offer these same restrictions to United States travellers and citizens who wish to come into Nigeria. So it does, I think, continue to build an unnecessary feeling of bad blood between the two countries, which is obviously not what they want. And so in the president coming out and urging for adherence to, international obligations, it's an instruction for us here in the country, but also for people in the diaspora to be aware of how they are positioning themselves. And at the same time, I do think that we can now continue to talk about the need for Nigeria's ambassadors to finally be announced so that they can also do this work of representing Nigeria on an international scale. But yes, I guess there's a lot to be said and continue to be said about this.
You're a very apt point, Femi. See, judicial reforms are long overdue in Nigeria. We have gotten into an era now where judges give judgments that are inconclusive. At first, I thought it was the electoral process that we started hearing the term inconclusive. Now, judgments are inconclusive. And I'll cite two examples. The case of the Labour Party judgment, where the two parties are interpreting what suits them, and the case of this judgment, where both parties are interpreting what suits them. And I'd like to ask a big question. If a judge says a suspension was excessive, what also stopped the judge from giving a definitive order that the person should be recalled? Because by the judge giving an advisory order, that's the loophole they have taken now. So when judges give judgments that leave loopholes, it deepens the problem in the country. And that's why I see we need judicial reforms. I was with somebody yesterday that was talking to me about since when they had been advocating for judicial reforms. It's not been today. We need a total overhaul, payment of judges, what constitutes the judge, people that get on the bench. We need a total overhaul in our country. And that reform also should go to the lawyers. We saw senior advocates of Nigeria. It was a day of disgrace and shame. Last Friday, a couple of Fridays ago, go on TV, say that the judgment said, when they had not read the CTC, that they should apologize to the Senate. That the contempt filed against Natasha, the contempt judgment given, was an apology to the Senate. And you see, I remember I said it here 1,000 times, that the apology is to the court. I've been vindicated. I don't talk if I don't have my facts. I'm a man of empirical facts. I don't quote what is not necessary. See, I have read through the CTC. I have read through the cross appeal. What the Senate have filed is a cross appeal. They filed a cross appeal against Natasha's prior appeal. And I know all the arguments. What is Natasha saying? Senator Natasha Akpoti saying in her appeal? She said, were the processes followed by the courts to be able to arrive at a judgment of contempt against her? She said in that for contempt to happen, two things must happen. The court must first serve something called a Form 48. If you do not reply to Form 48, then a Form 49 happens, and the whole process becomes against you. There's something called the Sheriff's Act that gives procedural guidelines for contempt. So she's challenging invariably the contempt. Then the Senate, what is the Senate and Senator Akpabio challenging? They are challenging the judgment that even said that the limit of the suspension was excessive. Because I've also read their cross appeal. And they said they are also challenging the fact that the court has no jurisdiction to dabble into matters that align with the National Assembly and all of that. They also said that the procedure was not good enough because in their case, a lot of the dispute resolution mechanisms were not exhausted in the National Assembly before the case came to courts. So they are saying the judgment should be struck out. And that's why I say it behoves on the judiciary. Two parties now. The first part against Senator Akpoti, she has gone to challenge her part. The second part against the Senate president, he has gone to challenge the part that concerns him. So we are both going to the Court of Appeal on a matter that has persisted for a while. Why we are going to the Court of Appeal is because enough clarity was not made as regards what transpired in the first judgment. And the Senate clerk was right. It was an advisory. You wonder that after somebody had used very hard words on the Senate, you should not remove your member for that long, it's excessive, you would only imagine a declarative judgment up next. But we didn't see that. After you said what somebody was doing is wrong, then the next thing that followed was, at your discretion. So the clerk of the National Assembly that used that lacuna was also right in the writing. But in all of these cases, they are now up to the appeal courts. We'll now go through another round of litigation. But please, this is a clarion call for judicial reforms in this country. We cannot allow this country to continue this way without due judicial reforms. Secondly, as regards President Buhari's burial, the truth is, he has come, he has seen, he has done his part. History will determine how he will be remembered. We have said our bit, we have done our analysis. But I think one thing I learned from that burial yesterday was, no matter high or mighty, no matter the homes you have, no matter the wealth you have, where you will have your final resting place is just 6 feet in the mud. So, you building homes on earth that cannot lead you eternally is a waste of your time. Because your place of internal rest is going to be a small grave, dog, for you. But also, on the flip side of it, what it reminds us is, the best place you should build your castles should not be Maitama or Banana Island. The best place you should build your castles is in doing good for humanity in the hearts of people. And I think that's instructive for all of us. Be you a rich man or a pauper, you will die someday. And all the houses and the big fat bank accounts you know or you have, you will not carry it anywhere. It's best you share whatever you have in your bank accounts in charity to humanity while you're alive. Because when you are gone, you don't know who will take your money.
I think yesterday was incredibly humbling and sobering for all. I think it would take somebody extremely stone-hearted to not have felt something yesterday after following the proceedings. What first struck me was the first images we saw of the body of the late former president, wrapped in the Nigerian flag, coming out of the front cabin of the aircraft, which was incredibly symbolic, as of course we know that usually in this type of situation, the remains of a person are brought out from the cargo underneath the aircraft. So I felt that this was a very powerful tribute from the President Bola Tinubu administration and the committee that was put together to put all the details together for that funeral, because it was a real honor. And upon coming out of the aircraft, of course, we saw them being led out. We saw the military ambulance in place of a hearse. Again, everything was symbolic, everything was intentional, and I think the right decisions were made. When the body was received in Daura, we saw the Muslim rites, the prayers being conducted in the helipad before he was taken to his homestead where he was buried. And even with the burial, it was extremely somber, and it had a touch of honor around it. From the moment we saw the 21-gun salute, which of course is the ultimate honor for any individual, whether it be a general or a president, a 21-gun salute is highly symbolic. And then, of course, the moment we saw President Bola Tinubu bowing before the body of the late president and bidding him farewell, just very touching. We saw Vice President Kashim Shettima leading those who were pouring some of the sand onto the grave as they were closing the grave. And for me also, the son of the president, Yusuf Buhari, also really stood out to me, because if you remember some of the stories we used to hear about Yusuf Buhari when his father was president, was around his love of power bikes and how he used to like riding his power bikes around Abuja. But to see that he's come into his own and he was the head of the home in that occasion, he was a man, he was not a boy in that occasion. I saw when he took his father's military sword, he took the hat, he took his shoes, they folded the flag, they gave it to Aisha Buhari, and she held that flag, as if her life depended on it. She was utterly broken. But I think that this set a precedent, a powerful precedent, as to how we should dignify the institution of the presidency, especially in times of this. This was truly a state funeral. It was truly an honorable funeral. And I think that as much as death is painful and it's sore, this was a very honorable way for him to go to his final resting place. So I think that yesterday's outing, as sad as it may be, was extremely well executed. And I think it's just important to note that. And now let's move on to issues around the Senate and the judiciary. Now, I think that we need to be careful, again, about issues of precedent that we set here. Because as much as that CTC, in essence, is saying it upholds the sovereignty of the Senate, we can't dabble into separation of powers as a suggestion as and when it's convenient for us. This is the problem. If we're running a nation that upholds separation of powers, and the judgment in essence, the CTC in essence is saying that, well, the Senate has its rules and the Senate should follow their rules. These are my suggestions. No problem. However, there are cases where the judiciary is allowed to intervene in the National Assembly affairs. And one of those cases is when there are fundamental rights, the violation of fundamental rights. And those include excessive, when there are excessive or overreaching outcomes on the Senate floor, of which the judge said so in her CTC. She wrote both excessive and she wrote overreaching as well. And if I'm to read the statement with the CTC verbatim, at the final paragraph 12, it said she finds that the Senate has the power to, and I believe should, recall the plaintiff and allow her to resume representing the people who sent her there to represent them. So the question is, if the judge feels so strongly about this, and the judiciary does have the power enshrined in it to intervene when there are issues concerning fundamental rights, why did the judge stop short of doing that? I think these are the questions that we should be asking. We can't start crying separation of powers and listing the rules, because part of the CTC also listed the various rules of the Senate that were violated and so forth. And that is not an issue of dispute, the issue of seats and so forth. Fine, let's say that has been settled. But ultimately, we are all in agreement that her time has been served. It's excessive, it's overreaching. So the question is, why can we not go the extra mile to ensure that something compelling can be done to reinstate this injustice that the judiciary also agrees has been perpetuated? It's not a figment of anybody's imagination. The judiciary has said that there's an injustice. So what is the job of the judiciary if it's not to rectify injustices? These are the questions.